Hello everyone, and welcome to the Cyber Samurai March edition 2026 of Cipher, where we kind of just go over current events that have happened in the news and some best practices. So today, let me share my screen. All right, here we go. Okay, so like I said, it's March, and our agenda for today is going to be going over the Stryker breach that happened about a week ago and how that plays in very well into the concept of zero trust architecture. So I was already planning on talking about zero trust architecture, and then the breach happened, and I thought, my goodness, these two things go hand in hand very well. So first of all, the Stryker breach happened on the 11th of March, and I didn't know Stryker. I wasn't familiar with them, but they produce medical equipment that's used in all sorts of stuff. I think ambulance, hospitals, surgery wards, all sorts of things like that. And they were hacked into by an Iranian group that is also not new. They surfaced, I think, in 2023, if I remember right. And they go by the name of Handala. That's the organization that took claim over the breach and defaced a lot of Stryker's, their Microsoft tenant with their own logo, that sort of thing. So they're the ones that claimed it. And reports are still pretty early on since it only happened a week ago, but it's looking like either one of two things happened. The company was broken into, and the entire Microsoft tenant was taken over, or at least the Intune piece of their tenant was taken over. And if you were here on the call last month, if you remember, I said pretty much everything in sysad technical world for IT boils down to three things: targets, vehicle, payload. So the vehicle, which in this case is Intune or perhaps their Microsoft tenant, was weaponized against them, and it either pushed it looks like it pushed wiper malware, which deletes the device. They did extract some data, but it seems like most of those policies just destroyed the device, just had it wipe itself, and then sometimes it would display the Handala logo. That seems like sometimes that happened, sometimes it didn't. And also, it's theoretical. I don't know if this is what happened or not, but it would be theoretical that an Intune policy could have just been created to wipe it and display their own logo. And so it might not have even been malware per se. It was just like a hey, destroy yourself type of a policy. Again, I'm not sure on the details of that, but either way, it was successfully deployed to what looks like about 200,000 devices, which is a significant part of that company. There's the article, the Ars Technica article, that kind of goes more into detail if you're curious. But this really plays well with the concept of zero trust, because all of this, it should have been very difficult for them to pull off. So we'll kind of get into that. So in the kind of leading up to the idea of zero trust, we have to go through some of the history in IT. So I've been in the field about 18 years, and I've seen the pace of things just increase and become exponential. Just the amount of tickets that come in, the things that IT is responsible for, the amount of apps and platforms that can be deployed and used in an organization, the places where your data can live. I mean, it can be in multiple on-prem places and cloud places on devices that you don't have any control over, saved in documents. I mean, it's become pretty insane to manage even just where is the data for this company, which kind of highlights one of the core principles of security, which is security can't be done without intelligence and understanding that intelligence. And so because the speed has increased so much, intelligence and understanding that has really become a lot more difficult, to the point where sometimes it doesn't even happen per se. Like an employee can request an app, and the IT department's so overwhelmed, they just, sure, you get the app. Here you go. I deployed it to your device. Off you go. Close the ticket. But that kind of mentality and that kind of speed has caused some interesting rifts, some big gaps. And one of those hit me in the face pretty hard in 2024. When the Snowflake breach happened. I don't know if you guys all remember that, but I had a couple of clients that were using Snowflake, and so on the breach reports there were indicators of compromise. Of, hey, if this IP address ever touched your information, if these types of commands were run, then you probably were breached. So I contacted Snowflake and I asked for the logs of, hey, tell me everything that's happened on my account here, and opened a ticket, worked with a help desk guy. And he told me that those logs don't exist. Like that entire side of their product at the time, this was 2024, had not been built out. They said, like, you can't get your audit logs. They're not even recorded anywhere. And he gave me some really, really rudimentary SQL commands where I could try to export like a change log. And I was like, no, this is so far down here. I need like who logged into the website, like who, as me, who created access keys, who did this sort of stuff. And he was like, it's not logged anywhere, that you can't find that. And so I did a little research, and that Snowflake in 2024 had SOC 2 compliance. And I think the industry's become there's such a breakneck speed in the industry that I think things are getting handed out that shouldn't be. How in the world they got SOC 2 compliance without having continuous monitoring, like it says in SOC 2, or the retention of audit logs? It's also a part of SOC 2 compliance. That shouldn't have happened. And I think a lot of that's just the speed. So I have this fun little picture over here, Novell. So this predates me. I never had to work on Novell servers. But I was, friends with the sysads who did, I think early 2000s, 90s kind of time frame. And one of them told me a story that stuck with me for a long time. And it was back in the day, he had to set up a Novell server. And so he's like, what I did was I bought a book similar to this one. And he said he read almost all of it. He became very familiar with architecture. It was like knew probably, 30, 40% of the commands that could be run on the operating system, and had a very deep understanding of just that whole environment. And he said, okay, once I felt comfortable, we ordered the server, it came, we built it. And he said it took him about 2 months between reading the book, deploying it, cabling it, testing everything, putting it in production before people were really using it. And I thought, oh my goodness, like that's an insane slow pace compared to me. Like in our world today I have created a virtual machine, done testing, and deleted that virtual machine, I think in under 30 minutes before, of just testing some weird thing that I needed to know. Okay, spin up my VM, blah, blah, blah. Okay, delete it, I'm done. And I'm like, wow, just the difference between those two is like, no wonder there's this need for a slower pace and a need for zero trust. So that gets us into the concept of zero trust, which you could probably ask 10 people for a definition of zero trust and get 10 different answers. Here's mine. Zero trust is essentially everything's in the open. You have a SIM involved, everything's being logged and audited, alerts are being sent out. And so because of that, everybody's actions are in the clear. You can't do something without me seeing it. I can't do something without you seeing it. And so there's this open accountability that's happening on the network. And it's very intentionally auditing privileged accounts and successful actions. I had an auditor tell me one time, nobody can hide from binary. You cannot change a computer without it being recorded somewhere, whether that's written to an audit log or not, or just in these ones and zeros over here. But a good auditor can always find that place where it was changed. So some of the core principles of this zero trust are, like I said before, like even if a company has a SOC 2 compliance, okay, I'm not going to just trust that. I'm going to ask that company, okay, show me audit logs. I created my account, I logged in here, show me where I can find my own audit logs. When was the last time you were audited by a third party for PCI or whatever compliance model that you need to do? You don't just trust, you really vet companies, vet code. And one of the biggest mindsets is just that you need to move slowly enough to understand. And I get it. Like, I'm not talking about pie in the sky craziness here. Like, I use PowerShell a lot. PowerShell is pretty high level. It has nothing to do with the ones and zeros and the actual like kernel calls down here. I don't understand the ins and outs of every command that I run, but I know enough about it that I kind of know the boundaries of how this works. Of course, you could probably spend the rest of your life researching the ins and outs of this giant blob of code and what it does. That's too far. I'm just saying, like, in general, as an industry, if we moved closer to just taking things more slowly, understanding things, being able to audit the boundaries of a thing, it would be much better. But that is very countercultural. I mean, you close less tickets if you really take time to understand the new app and the new device and the new, whatever it is that you're bringing on, cloud service. There's also the idea of you do hardening first and then you deploy. You do least privilege, which means you don't just get admin for asking for admin. Okay, what's your role? What's your job description? And justify to me why you need admin. Okay, actually you don't need admin. You need, this other privilege that will let you do what you need, but you don't have full control over the system. Least privilege takes a while. It takes testing. Hey, I changed your permissions. Can you do it now? No. Okay. What about now? What about now? And you build it out a little bit. It takes time. It takes the ability to verify. You have to make sure that everything's acting the way you think it is before you just throw it into production. And then in least privilege, auditing is just absolutely critical, because auditing is like the caboose of the entire thing. Okay, I think firewalls act this way, and so I build it this way. I think the devices will interact with that firewall this way. But at the end of the day, if you're logging everything, you can prove all the other pieces are or are not acting the way you think. Because if you do a test and you can find a log where this device successfully talked to this other device or this cloud service or whatever, if that's in the logs as a success, somewhere in my logic of firewall, I don't understand firewalls or network routing or something, because I should not have ever been able to do that, and I was. So that's why auditing is it's critical. You have to keep your audit logs for at least 6 months, just to be able to reverse engineer anything that happens. Also, one of the other big points is that communication happens first and then action. Okay, in an open environment like that, if you have a good security team, you're going to freak them out if you create a new domain admin and you haven't talked to them first, because everybody's going to get notified, everybody's going to see it. So you have to communicate first in that kind of environment, which honestly just makes a better team dynamic anyway. So also the other thing is that this is so countercultural. It's just always going to be an uphill battle at times. A lot of times leadership doesn't understand the need for this. Hey, why can't we just, throw this out there, close the ticket, just build the thing, just, have email that does this. Everybody else is doing it. AI can do it easily, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but you don't understand. Okay, that's how stuff like Stryker happens, because I'm sure they had a complicated environment, but if they had this sort of a mindset where everything was done in the clear and people were getting notified, even if that hacker team came in and built an Intune policy that did only Intune types of things, where no antivirus would ever block it because it's all just company policy being pushed down, except that company policy was to wipe the device. Even if they did that, all the other Intune admins should have gotten an alert. Hey, there's a brand new Intune policy that user so-and-so just created. And okay, there should be a Teams chat where however many Intune admins you have in a company that size, I don't know, 50, 100, whatever, they're on talking to each other. Hey, did you do that? No, I didn't do it. What's going on? Like, somebody just made a policy and nobody did it. Okay, what's the policy do? Like, at some point I would have thought that it would have been stopped before 200,000 devices got wiped. I just wonder what zero trust in Stryker look like. I don't know the ins and outs of their company. It just makes me wonder. Also, someone whose career's been a little bit interesting to follow is Charlie Bell. He has made a lot of strides in Microsoft. I think he was hired on 2021 or 2023, I can't remember, over from Amazon, and he started making a lot of big changes. A lot of Microsoft they've become kind of sloppy in their security policies, and he was correcting a lot of that. And just last month in February, he was removed from his position, and Microsoft wasn't very quiet about the fact that he was creating waves, and it wasn't. They weren't always thrilled with his decisions because security is difficult. So anyway, just I'll be prepared for more of an uphill battle. But also this kind of mindset, this is one of the primary things that has to do with why I named my company after the samurai. So I'm sure there are lots of fun stories about samurai, and I won't get into this one too much. But I just love their intentional dedication to excellence and just how they interacted with the system. So there's a concept of Zanshin. I don't know how you say it, Zanshin, but it's just like an awareness of your situation and your own effect on that environment. And so this man, Awa Kenzo, was an archer. It was about 100 years ago. And it was said that he knew his own training ground so well and his own body so well that he could go out on a moonless night in the pitch dark and still hit a double bullseye because he had become so aware of the objects in his training ground and how his own body felt when he was shooting his bow. And he knew the trajectory it should be. He knew how much tension his muscles should have. And so because of that, he had taught himself how to do that in the complete dark. I'm not saying I ever want to be like that. My goodness, that's so far over here. We'll probably never get to that level, and that's okay. But I'm just saying, as an industry, we're way over here. If we were a little more like this, I think we would all benefit a lot. So I wanted to go through one just kind of project, one ticket, if you would, that let's look at it without zero trust, and then let's look at it with zero trust. So let's say there's a new CFO that's been hired on. Okay, they're going to need all the things. They're going to need an account. They're going to need a device, just kind of all that onboarding, setup stuff. Okay, so if you were going to do this project without zero trust and just kind of an older mindset, or just trying to close the ticket, and when I say that, I'm not making fun of any IT people. I was SysAd for years. I understand I've got 50 tickets over my head, and like however fast I can close these tickets, I have 49 now and I have 48 now, and that pressure. But I'm saying like it really is a different mindset to just teach leadership of like a completely new type of pace of your work, of like, really, if we're not going to have a data breach, it's because we understand and we're being very intentional in our actions, and we understand what our environment should look like. And that's how you detect data breaches, is because they're always an anomaly. Some account is either brand new or does something that it hasn't done before. It shouldn't do, like the database, was accessed all the records by a single account. Like even the database admin doesn't do that. That's weird. And that because your environment. Okay, so the new CEO is being hired on. So without zero trust, you could make them an admin. You could just give them full admin rights to the databases and the servers that run those databases, so they can remote desktop in and they can run SQL queries or whatever they need to do. You can give them full cloud, global tenant, or in your Microsoft tenant global admin, excuse me. You don't have to do least privilege in this sort of mindset. It's just, hey, just give them everything because that's easy. You get to close the ticket. You get to deploy their laptop with whatever the latest Mac OS is, or Windows 11, and just whatever default configuration, just download the whole operating system from Windows, and just deploy it as is. Let's pretend the CFO is coming from another company where they use this really amazing cloud financial services that they liked. They want to bring that over to this company. Okay, well, you're the new CFO, and so because you have C in your title, you just get it, and so you just spin up the new service for them. Off you go. And you also just make them admin on their device for 1 to 2 weeks. I didn't know this. This was a weird thing for me. I've known many companies that did this, even large companies that was like, when anybody got a new device, you just got to be admin on that for 1 to 2 weeks. And the sysadmins would say, hey, just install whatever you need, put all your apps and programs on it, whatever. In 2 weeks, we'll take it away and we'll lock it down at that point. That was standard practice for a lot of organizations. And now that I'm in security, it's like, I could not think of something worse. Like those 2 weeks are just crazy. So much malware is probably installed in those 2 weeks and then never gets off the device. So anyway, least privilege not being done here. And so you just kind of make them admin. You enroll it in an MDM so you can kind of slightly manage it later on. And then off you go. You give them a laptop and they're good. So that would allow you to close the ticket. Like, I don't know, that would take 4 or 5 hours a day, however long that takes to get through that checklist. So this, the same project with zero trust in mind. So first, remember, communication's very important in this kind of architecture. Okay, so everybody's going to see what I'm doing, and so I need to add someone to the financial group in the cloud or an Active Directory on-prem or whatever. And so communication first. Hey, security. Hey, IT. I'm going to create a new CFO account. Here's their job role. Here's the permissions. Here's how the org chart kind of changes now that they're coming in. These are the permissions that they'll need, and then create the account. So when everybody gets alerted, nobody has to freak out because we're all on board. You would build the device with them as an admin. You probably just thinking like a PC tech, you log in as them as an admin, do all the things you need, and then remove admin and then give them the device. You could just deploy from a hardened image that your whole company uses, that you've gone through a security checklist before, or you, at least if you're going to download from Apple or from Microsoft, you're going to want to go through and delete all the bloatware and do any permissions and hardening, or the updates and the hardenings that an MDM couldn't do. Like, I've never worked with an MDM that could do like a BIOS password or that sort of a thing. There probably aren't too many of those these days. It's been a while since I've been a PC tech, but there are typically things that an MDM can't do, updating of really third-party apps, that sort of thing, that you want to do before you deploy the device. And then also, instead of just allowing that cloud app that they've requested, you could vet it. You could look up, what's the history of this company? You could reach out to the company. What do they do for logging? When was the last time they had an audit? What were the results of that audit? All that sort of stuff. In worst case scenario, if you can't do that whole vetting of that cloud service in time, you can let the new CFO, hey, let them know we're going to give you the device or whatever, but this other app you requested, this cloud service you requested, we're going to have to like vet it a little bit. Security needs to look at it. So here's your device, but that we got to wait on that one. And that's always difficult conversation with somebody with a C title, just, hey, we got to wait. But that's part of zero trust architecture. Is just, we're not going to standardize on this. We're not going to put this into production until we understand it, at least on some level. So you could enroll the device in MDM. Hopefully you have some sort of lockdowns and policies for auditing. You need to make sure that shows up in your centralized logging. This whole mindset, you really aren't doing a lot of this stuff without a SIM, whatever SIM that looks like, but you should make sure that device is showing up correctly in the SIM. You're seeing the logs that you think you are. And then also in a truly secure kind of environment, typically you have one network where you build everything. And then before any device goes from that network onto a production network, you need to do a security scan or a script that verifies security settings. And only after it passes that is that device allowed to be in production. So there's this whole kind of mindset of finish it later. I mean, just look what that's done to the gaming industry. Like back when I was a kid, you got your little CD and the game worked, and I never heard of what a patch was before, because the game worked flawlessly out the bat or out of the box. But now, like, there's just, that has its own things. Security issues never get fixed, and security wasn't a thing, in Red Alert days. But But that sort of mentality of just like the gaming industry, like you get half a game now, and oh, don't worry, we'll fix it. We're constantly doing updates, but sometimes you never get to what you promised me. So that sort of a mindset, it just really doesn't work, especially in this world, because as soon as that device goes from the building network onto a production network, you're on the hook. Like that's in the real world. That could be hacked at any moment and needs to be secure first and then moved into production. And then last step is you give the new CFO the laptop, but then also have the onboarding security discussion. Hey, here's how to not click the link in email. Here's how you would tell us that something is going on with security. This is the kind of things that security will ask you to do. This is what we won't ask you to do. That sort of thing. So I understand this is kind of it's a big concept, and it has a lot of principles that are very difficult to pull off, especially when you consider all the different environments that you're in. But it really is a much better way to do business. It can keep you from getting breached. It can help in any kind of situation because everything is much more known. And so a lot of finding a hacker is seeing those little bumps, those anomalies. Well, the more everybody on your team understands your environment and knows what's normal, the faster you can see those bumps and the faster you can react to them. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope you all have a secure month, and I will see you next month.